Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, Mark Bennett's back. He's been travelling the globe, talking PDS with various people ever since the previous time we were on the podcast, and it's good to have the sensei back. Mark, welcome back.
It's a pleasure, Stuart, and it's great you're healthy and keeping busy with all your cunning plans of dealing with all the challenges you face.
I'm definitely keeping busy. I'm not sure about the healthy bit. That's an area that has been neglected. So
well, maybe we need to have a chat about that.
Yeah, we definitely do. I've certainly not been living up to my standard of excellence. Although I have recently re-engaged, so I'm on the slope. I'm on the positive slope.
Okay.
You've been on your travels, your adventures. Tell everybody about what you've been up to.
Well, UK-wise, I've been working with a tennis academy in Canterbury that's been fantastic because it's with performance and the leisure-type players, but we've had a real shift, and that's a lovely sport that is, one or two people across a net, and getting them to make the connection how PDS can still integrate within that environment that isn't a football, basketball, hockey type element. So we've had some huge shifts there within particularly some of the performance players, and even down to the 5-6-year-old kids, of how more engaged they are, how they're communicating, supporting each other, and the coaches, I think, are pleasantly surprised at the impact it's had. So they're embracing it. I've been in the States working with Cleveland Indians, the baseball team, and that contract's just been extended this week with the work I've been doing. So I do 1 week a month there with them. So this is my fourth month coming up at the end of this month. So they've extended that, and that's been exciting again because it's in America. I think athlete-centered and change and, developing with behaviors now is becoming accepted, but actually having the applicational tools to bring it alive is not there as much so far as in my experience. So they've really embraced it, and it's been a pleasure to be working with them. And I'm still doing the stuff with some of the basketball teams and some of the national linked in with a few of the sports. So yeah, and schools. Yeah, still doing some stuff with some schools, Cheltenham Prep School as well. So working with the young kids, linking it into the sport. So keeping busy.
as always. So lots of stuff going on. The Cleveland Indians one's obviously of interest. They've got some real drivers and some focus on particularly on people development, talent development, and also coach development. I know, for example, Dan Coyle, who was on the podcast a month or so back, has been working with them for quite some time. So it sounds to me like they're putting quite a lot of investment in bringing in external support to help their people be better at developing the athlete. It sounds to me like there's a real culture shift there.
Yeah, it is, and it's. I think it's a strength and a weakness. I know they wouldn't mind me saying, because they love innovation, they love pushing the boundaries. They're not one of the wealthiest teams in baseball, but they're really focused and passionate about getting the best out of what they have, which is fantastic. Where their challenge is sometimes they don't spend long enough on one thing to embed it enough to see the systemic habitual change, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because they're always looking for something new. So it's probably Daniel's done it as well, but when I came in, it's just discussing with them, have you got the applicational real world tools to give to everyone at every level, and not just in the sport, but also in the leadership, in the management, in the HR, wherever there's an in the Indians way, as they call it, is have you got the understanding of the practical tools? Does everyone know what it looks like? And have you got a support network to facilitate the change required to get where you want to? And it's the application of the support of the change is where they've had the challenges in the past. But I mean, I'm very grateful that they reached out to me through one of the podcasts, I might add, to see the value in it and be open to listening to me and actually accepting my direct and challenging questions, which, as you know, I'm quite relentless on that. So they saw value in it, which I was really appreciated with.
And so I'd be interested. I mean, and I know we're going to sort of talk about some of the things that you've been observing of late and some of the challenges that you're sort of beginning to see. But I think there's a bit of a theme here that I've started to see emerging, certainly in my world as well, which is how willing people are. I think there's a conceptual kind of jump on board. You know, people are very bought into the idea, and they love the sort of philosophy, if you like, and the approach and the way of working. But then the reality of living it, I mean, you just mentioned about being like asking sort of tough, direct questions and being quite relentless. But that's part of just your living the philosophy, isn't it? The philosophy of excellence, which is to ask the questions, because there's an agreement's been made that we're going to operate in a certain way, and to let somebody kind of not follow through on those particular actions you wouldn't be doing your job effectively. So you describe it as relentless, but in reality, I think it's just something that is unavoidable, because actually you have to do it that way if you're going to live the philosophy. But what I'm finding is a lot of other people sometimes find it difficult to live the philosophy in quite the same way. Have you discovered similar challenges?
Yes, definitely. And I've noticed an even bigger shift I'd say in the last 4 or 5 years. So as you know, Stuart, this has been my passion since the early 90s, and it certainly wasn't the completed product by any stretch of the imagination then, but I'd say from 98, 99 onwards, the principles were in place. And I always recognized that the supporting of change within the influencers, the coaches and managers, was always the tough element that no one had really invested in before. And even working with Super League teams and Premiership Rugby early 2000, that was my light bulb moment, where in front of me everyone was excellent because I was there. And as soon as they went back into the environment and I wasn't there, they regressed back. So it's a big learning curve for me. And I think in the last 5 years, it may be one of the negative elements of the internet, of podcasts. We're on one now. The YouTubes, the webcasts, is that people get a lot of information, they get excited in the moment, and then they attempt to implement. But what they haven't done is say, do I really understand what that is? And am I prepared to go through the struggle that's required internally with me first, because that's where most of the struggle will come from, to, once I agree something, understand I've got to do this every single time, and I've got to get everyone to buy into it before I start it, but I have to be relentless with it. Otherwise, it will just regress. Have I had that discussion with myself, and am I prepared for the journey? Because if you're not, it's not going to work. And in the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen more and more of that, where people, I think it's become more accepted that it's definitely the way to go, but people's ability to bring it alive and, importantly, keep it alive is where people are falling down. And I think part of that is down to not really understanding what it looks like, not being able to explain to others what it looks like, not having the tools to bring it to life, but importantly, not understanding the dedication it takes to change the way you think and you act often enough, and know everyone around you is ready to regress as well. And you being one of those people that can say, I need to be in the present every moment to facilitate the change over the time required to get to the other end where it becomes autonomous.
The thing I think I find with this is, it's and I think this is one of the things that people sort of struggle to get hold of, is that this isn't about some sort of externally imposed architecture of performance. It's not about, creating some sort of nebulous idea of how we might want to be, and then not being able to live up to that fantasy. It's grounded in reality. The approach and the way of saying this is that you're genuinely getting the individual to make a firm commitment to a particular course of action, and they've been through the process and they've mapped out the options and they've looked at all the various things, said, no, I definitely want this, I'm making a commitment. And then when, like you say, when it becomes a bit difficult, when it becomes a bit of a challenge, then it's almost like then that kind of the self-sabotage comes in, and the excuse making comes in, and and then people actually start to get a bit, I don't know if you've ever discovered this, but I've certainly had a little bit of this, where people start to push back and go, and they almost get angry with you because you're the one who's trying to keep them honest to their set intentions. And it's almost like you're holding a mirror up, and they don't like what they see in the mirror, and so then they're going to blame you for holding the mirror up, even though what you're sort of saying to them is, look, I'm just asking you some questions about what it is you say you want. It's quite an interesting dynamic, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not great every single time with influencing people the first time I meet them. I'd say that was an area I need to get better at, because obviously I understand this. I live it inside out. I don't believe you can switch it on and off. I believe there has to be a way of thinking deep down that you buy into the philosophy of a life philosophy, of a way of thinking and doing, not a turn it off and on when you come to a training session. So sometimes, I can be, well, hang on, I can see the solution right here. If you do this, you'll get exactly what you want in this present moment. And you're having the barriers. We're going, that's change right there, and that's too much. And I actually don't believe that the players could even change. Never mind me allowing you to do it, even if I say, okay, let me show you. So it's a big commitment to make. And I think the other element is when you make the commitment, you've got to, if we use sports as an example, when you're going away or you're going through challenging teams, a great team always goes through that what if. Okay, so what if this happens? Are we prepared for this? What are we going to do here? Are we ready? Well, okay, let's put some scenarios and situations in to challenge ourselves to see the solutions we come up with. And it's having that discussion with the coaches to go, well, okay, so what if this happens? What if this happens? What are you going to do? And where's your support network? Because when you start this, it can be a very lonely journey. And I know you've had people like Alan Keane on that's, shared that. It can be lonely sometimes. Is you're not always going to have a crazy Mark Bennett as the mentor, but what you can have is peer mentor support if you set it up initially at the beginning of the journey. And I think this is one of those strategies that people don't really spend time sat down thinking about, planning and then acting before they go for it, because there's a lot of people buying into this, and quite rightly, but we don't want them to trip up to a point they can't stand back up again and learn from it. Otherwise, as you say, you get the kickback challenge. Well, hang on, what are you doing this for? Why are you asking me these questions? I didn't actually commit to this, and I didn't realize when I started the journey it'd be this, and I don't believe, and you get the common questions coming up. So I think it's getting the preparatory discussion and strategy robust first, and that's when we can really start driving success.
So in terms of that preparatory discussion, in terms of the framing and the setting the scene, it's not something I don't think we've covered before when we've talked about the approach and everything else. And I do recommend anybody, by the way, who's listening to Mark for the first time, you've probably picked up that he has been on before, and rather than us go over what we're talking about, I recommend going back to in the feed and going through those episodes, because there's a lot of stuff in there. But anyway, flicking back to this preparatory conversation, so this kind of creating the ground, if you like, or the foundations for the building on this, what's the approach that you've found has paid dividends the best?
Well, the first thing is having the discussion, so whoever you're working with, you both agree what it looks like, what athlete-centered actually is, what it looks like, not just a statement. What does that look like in training? What does that look like in matches? What does that look like within the coach? What does that look like within the athletes and teams? And dispel a lot of the myths and misunderstanding out there, and then establish that baseline. So once we agree, understand what the journey is going to be, that there'll be a transition. Are you ready for it? To be comfortable being uncomfortable, and then get that baseline in. Get them to film themselves, often regularly, so players and themselves forget the camera's there. Do a few sessions, match sessions as well, because it's quite clear in my experience that you can have a coach that's very different in a match scenario than a training scenario. Sit down on your own as a coach, look through the video, watching yourself, listening, the reaction of the players, what you're saying, how you're saying it, the impact of what's happening, how long you're talking for, who's talking, all those processes about the behavior and the communication, the impact it's having. take your notes, and then I can do the same, and then we have that discussion. So it's that baseline first, and then raising the awareness to then they can see, I can now see what you're talking about, and actually I know where I am within the beginning of the journey for me, and that's where everything begins, because then we can start actioning a strategy of, okay, so where would be your focus? And this is going back to, if we brought an athlete or a team together, we wouldn't say, right, I've got 500 things I want you in 5 seasons' time to be awesome at, so we're going to start them all today. And we've got 30 seconds on each one. You know, we pick, what's the daddies? What's the number 1, 2, 3? If you could only work on one thing, what would it be? Let's agree that. Okay, let's plan now our strategy moving forward. Where's your support network? How can you review and act on these 1 or 2 elements? We can review that, then we can grow from there. Establish the fundamentals, if that makes sense, but know what they look like. But we must establish our baseline first, and we must establish what athlete-centered coaching actually looks like for coach and athlete. And
is that, and I'm assuming that that's a process that you would advocate for the coach to do with the athletes too?
Yeah, definitely. That awareness is key, because we don't do it often enough. I mean, the amount of teams that watch video of games, but they're looking at the game and the score and the tactics and the execution of them. They're not actually looking at the behaviours of themselves and the choices they could have made, and their commitment to them, and how they communicated, how they impact on the players around them, and the coach and their engagement in the sessions. So it's, for me, the baseline of athlete and coach and managers, if it's there, and coach to coach, has to be the start point, because how can you develop somebody on a journey if they don't know where the start of the journey is? For me, I see that as madness, to be honest.
So essentially then the approach you're taking here is, I guess, is a little bit of a problem-based learning approach, isn't it? Because what you're doing is you're allowing either the athlete or the coach to identify for themselves the problem or the challenge that they face, and then getting them to sort of focus in on what they consider to be the biggest or the most important, what you call the daddies, and then really focusing hard on those things, not trying to do too much in one go, but just focus hard on those big ticket items that they've identified for themselves through this raised awareness.
Yeah, and it's an interesting element to that as well, Stuart, because often, and I'm not saying all the time, but I'd say 80% of the time, is when a coach or a player watches the video back of themselves, listening to themselves, seeing how they react to certain situations, they won't actually see everything. So often what it would take is for me to look through the video, and I take my notes, I see their notes, and then I have the discussion. Okay, 2 minutes 6, let's have a look at this. What are you seeing here? Okay, have a look again, but have a look at this. And all of a sudden you can see, I didn't even see that. So it's, you know, that thing, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you don't see what you don't see until someone points it out to you. So now, people that are PDS trained, I know for a fact, people like Alan Keane and many others out there, Mike Fords, etc., could do that with another coach, no problem at all, because they understand what to look for. But often what you find is they honestly don't know what to look for, so they're just not seeing it. So one of the things is having that discussion, spending time, getting them to make the connections, and then they oh my God, I can see this. Now, often, as we know, when that happens, they may, before this process, score themselves 8, 9 out of 10 for a coach. We go through this process, and at the beginning they may score themselves 1, 2, 3 out of 10. So part of that is supporting them to say, look, you know, you're not a bad coach. You're the same coach you were. You're just more aware of elements you weren't aware of. You couldn't change them before because you weren't aware of them. So you weren't making mistakes because you didn't know what you know now. Now, if you continue to do them, then we could challenge you as a coach. But in the past, you didn't. So how can you challenge yourself?
This is one of the problems I have with reflection. So a lot of people talk about, reflective practice. Reflective practice is really important, and coaches, all good coaches are really good at reflecting. And I don't disagree that reflective practice is important, but I think you need a framework to reflect within. And quite a lot of people aren't really able to accurately reflect. They're not reflecting, they're recollecting. All they're doing is playing back in their mind what happened and kind of making sort of, I suppose, qualitative assessments of what they thought worked, what they thought didn't work. And often I find that those assessments are pretty inaccurate. Not necessarily inaccurate, but one of two things is happening. Either they're attending to the wrong things, i.e. the things they think they need to focus on, they really don't need to focus on, or they are the things that they get really bent out of shape about, as in the things that they think are like critical, are actually things that are the things that they haven't. They're not focusing on in quite the way they should. An example would be, I had a session not long ago with a coach and got really frustrated because the session wasn't working. And the weirdest thing about it was the way he designed the session was designed for it not to work. Maybe he didn't intend that, but actually what he did, there was guaranteed to be some failure and some difficulty. And the fact that it didn't work straight away was a source of frustration. So he was just looking at the fact that the session wasn't working, and so he therefore changed the session because it wasn't working. My view to him, and in terms of the reflection back to him, was there was some really great learning happening there, but all you could see was struggle. So it's kind of interesting how people don't see the right things. Like you say, you don't see what you don't see.
Yeah. And it's also is having the discussion where, as an example, is recognizing what success is. And as you know, a smooth session, we need to challenge those, because where success is covering the content on the session and doing exactly what you've asked them to do, or actually dealing with struggle, challenge, problems, and coming up with solutions that may not happen first time, but we raise our awareness, and that mayhem growth often comes from that if we manage it in the right way. So again, some coaches, as you say, get caught up in, well, I wanted this to happen, that didn't happen, so therefore I'm looking at this, and they're missing all the key elements. And you know my principle is behavior first, performance results. Behavior, behavior, behavior. And often coaches don't know what to look for in behavior, one within themselves and within the players, and then or identifying, well, what would be acceptable and unacceptable, and what would be excellent within those behaviors, because if I can spot them, that could reduce so many of the other issues I'm actually spending too much energy looking at, i.e. the tactics, the execution, the score lines. So it's reconnecting them to the source of the issues often, which in my opinion is 99% of the time the coach and athlete behaviors. And
do you find that's a blind spot, in the sense that, you talk about behavior first, performance results? It's the inattention to the behavioral piece that I think is often is that the bit that you find is missing most often?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I haven't met many coaches we've gone through this process with that's in their priority, unless actually now, Stuart, listen to your podcast, and now they're getting in touch. Oh yeah, I've looked at this. I'm not saying they see everything, but yeah, that tide is turning in a positive way. There's a good point on podcasts, but commonly, yeah, they're just not seeing it, because, as well as most coaches, most basic courses are technical and tactical. Unless they're very lucky, they'll go to under a head coach, which is normally coach led. I'm generalizing here, and they're focused on results. They're focused on, backtracking from a result. So if it's a win, then we do a general, yeah, we were really good, we were great. And if they lose, it's a hyper detailed analysis of everything, what went wrong. So their evaluation is ineffective, because why is it different based on the scoreline? So when they've had years and years of this, where it's really tactical, technical loaded, they're just not discussing it. So if you're not discussing it, you're probably not looking for it.
And so in terms of over the period of time, I mean, it's obviously good to see that podcasts are having some positive effect. Yeah. But interestingly, actually, just flicking back to something you said earlier on, because I did make a note to talk about it, and we never got back to it, which is I've not thought about that before, actually, and I think you're absolutely right around one of the challenges we have in this information age is it's almost like the range of information is now bewildering, and there's a new thought or idea every week. So no one's actually following through on a single thread for a period of time, because they're always throwing in the new idea and the new idea and the new idea. And it is tempting, isn't it? And I've seen a lot of people doing this, and I was certainly guilty of this in my career, of thinking that, the magic bullet is literally just around the corner. I'll find it one day, and then all my woes will be solved. And I mean, the PDS is probably as close to a magic bullet as you're ever going to find, but it's not a magic bullet in the sense that it still takes a significant commitment and a significant workload in order to bring it to life in any meaningful way. But that's what anything that's any good requires. So why should this be any different?
Yeah, I mean, everything boils down to the human factor. And if if you're I see PDS as there's a holistic structure of the whole thing, a change protocol to support organizational change, but it will always boil down to the tools you're giving an individual, and often that would mean they'd have to be more conscious in the present moment of their state, what they're seeing, and the decision they're going to make in that moment, and how they're going to make the decision, how they're even going to communicate it. Now, that's challenging, and we're asking them to do that every time, every day, every moment, because the more often we do it, then the more skillful we get, the more comfortable we get, and the more consistent the message. The fact coaches talk much less using these principles is great, but also going back to the point of some coaches still don't quite get what athlete-centered is, and the stood on the sideline saying nothing is not athlete-centered, as we know. Or it could be if we developed athletes to do their own thing effectively and we're throwing problems at them, but the transition is often not that. So we get coaches that are talking a lot and think, well, okay, so to be effective in this, I just talk less, is one of the challenges. And also that I've seen quite commonly now is the coach is thinking, yeah, this is really good, Mark, watch this. And they're not problem solving as much live, so that they're missing that as one of our success criteria. But what they'll have is the players without the coach will come no huddle, and they'll have one or two players talking, telling the other players all the answers. So actually all we've done is we've transformed the coach-led coach into a player. Now we've got a coach playing on the pitch or on the court that's actually doing the job of a coach-led coach. So it's breaking down these barriers to understand, well, actually that's not it. This is what it is, and let me show you what that looks like, and then understand this is going to be tough for you. Back to, as we discussed at the beginning, is, are you ready for it? Do you know where you are now? Do you know what it looks like? Do you know that start beginning to get buy-in, to get everyone to know how to support each other, and know change takes time to be autonomous, but actually the impact can be immediate. So that's where the practical tools come in handy. And if we can do that, we give them a positive reinforcement where they're recognizing, wow, it can have an impact, but also understand as soon as you're having a bad day, you can regress straight back. Or if it's not going to plan, you can just go, well, now I'm going to tell them again. And we can destroy everything we ever worked for over the few months before, where we're getting players to be more engaged, problem solving, working things out, challenging coach when they need to. All these principles can be shut down as soon as a coach goes, right, stop, I'm telling you, you need to do this. And I'm not saying there aren't moments to that. Basketball in timeouts is a great example. We want the players to problem solve live. The timeouts more should be, if we have an effective team, they should be more the coach using the chess match, where he knows the other coach. He knows, right, when we come in, we're doing this. I'm pretty sure the coach is going to ask his players to do this. So, guys, I'm raising awareness to it. If they do this, what are we going to do? And it's that type of thing. So, and there will be times where it might be 2 minutes left and the coach says, right, guys, I want you to do this right now. Trust me. But they're few and far between, and they're not commonplace.
So in that scenario where you were talking about how it's not just sitting back and not saying anything,
yeah,
and there's no problems to be solved. So if you're trying to raise awareness that it's not that, it's something else, what does the something else look like from your perspective?
The something else should be is sharing with everybody what the aim of a coach is. And for me, it's the aim of the coach should be to make yourself redundant while allowing players to have the confidence and competence to make effective choices, execute with intent, and review both the choice and the execution independently, separately, live under any type of pressure. So my aim as a coach is to get you there where you don't need me. However, I know there'll be upskills, there'll be challenges, there'll be support that you require. But there's a sliding scale right now. Now, my aim in every moment is to do as little as possible, but I've got to make sure that you are working to acceptable. And as players, you're working together live to, one, recognize when you're doing excellence and recognize how you did it and how you can repeat it. Recognize when it's unacceptable and how to adjust, whether that's a choice or an execution thing. Recognize how to support each other's behaviors on and off training, in and out of training, on and off the court and the pitch. So I'm just going to be there for a gatekeeper and a supporter of the principles that we've agreed, and I'm going to allow you to grow, but I'm going to be very clear on the parameters of the permission I give you. So I want to be stood here doing nothing, but I want to stretch and challenge you because I want you to grow as much as you can. So I will be throwing challenges in. I will be asking you to come up with solutions, but not in discussion. I want you to show me the solutions. So it's getting them to understand that's where I want you to be. I don't want one coach telling one player to tell all the other players what the answer is. I don't want those dominant players. I want leaders, but I want every player to have the confidence to support each other in when it's acceptable, when it's unacceptable, and when it's exceptional within behaviours, choices and execution. But I want it to be live. I don't want it to be stopping for chats and tell me what should have done when you recognise it was not right. And you're telling me now you knew the choice you needed to make, and now we're having the discussion.
So the decision making and the kind of the action possibilities are live. They're kind of the awareness of those opportunities are done as close to live as possible, if not actually live.
Yes, and we can manipulate the pressure loading to support their growth in that, but that's what we want. We want, if it was basketball, we want the guys running back and shouting to the guy. And remember, that rule of 3 I shared it's a game changer of a tool. It's so simple, but it's had so much impact. We're saying at 1, self as a player recognizes when they're unacceptable and when they're exceptional and throws their hands up to let the other players know, okay, I recognize and someone call with a solution. If they're not sure the solution, as they're running back, they're going, okay, so what about here? What's my other choice? And another player straight away goes, okay, here, this one, hand touch, thumb up, whatever it is, okay, recognition, acceptance. And then what we're saying is if 1, that doesn't happen, 2 is another player recognize someone's making an ineffective choice. So as a running back, he's just shouting and say, okay, this choice. But we've developed an environment and a culture where the person that's receiving the information accepts it. He doesn't push out the barriers. So this can happen up and down the whole time. And all we're doing is we're manipulating the other teams to put in situations and challenges and problems to see if they can solve them. So then we can up the pressure. We can make it what I call nasty training, where it's full on. We're trying to catch the opposition out now. We split them in timeouts or the little groups and go, right, Billy, what winds Billy up. Stay within the rules, but I want you to get in his head. Where's his weakness, right and left side? So what do you need to do to really challenge the opposition teams and then let them go at it and step back? And then you're just being there to go, are they applying what they said? Are they recognizing what they should based on where I know what they know in understanding of the game, the choices and the execution? And then if they're not, give them the opportunity to fix it. And then if they can't fix it, 2 things can happen. They can go, coach, stop, right. We need some support here because we're doing this, or we've got conflict here. We need you. Or coach says, well, stop. Okay. Let's just review what's happening there to get a bit of clarity. So this is where that ability, and I see it as one of the key things in this philosophy, is a coach's ability to scan and know what he's looking for. And he's explained it to the players, and the discussion's been with the players. So the players know exactly what they're looking for as well. And it's synced. The coach is not looking for something different than every single player. They understand the behaviors, what they are. They've been pre-agreed, and they understand the choices they can make and the permissions, and the commitment to any choice is 100% commitment execution. And that's all the coach is asking the whole time. So it kind of simplifies our expectation, and all coach has to do then is manipulate the situation and watch and listen to, is it happening? So even if they're making a wrong choice, they're going, well, actually, now I've heard someone say there's a different choice. I haven't even thought of that myself as a coach, but yeah, sounds good. And even if when they make the choice and commit to it, it doesn't come off, that's still great because we're exploring. We're not expecting success in every choice. We're looking for, can you now change your choice and adapt? Even if it doesn't come on, we're learning for it. We're being organic. We're growing. And we can let them carry on with that. It's only when it becomes unacceptable and they can't manage it or problem solve in the behaviors or the choices where they can even stop and go, coach, we need some support here. Or coach can sort of go, okay, quick review. But you're looking at maximum 60 seconds. And we want to get that down to 30 seconds. It shouldn't be a long 2, 3 minute, 4 minute discussion, which you often see.
I'm at risk of ruining what I think is a absolutely cherished tool, the rule of 3. Because I think in what you said there, I might have maybe misheard slightly, but I think I might have heard a rule of 4. Because I think I heard a fourth option, which is where the players stop and ask the coach for the support because they've all recognised that they don't have the answer before the coach.
That's still at 2. That's part of 2.
Oh, I thought 2 was player to player.
Yeah, player to player or player to coach. It's basically if you think about 2 as reaching out to anyone.
Got it.
And so what we're looking at was looking at 1. Yeah, that person's recognising it, hands up, whether it's unacceptable. It's important that they recognise that, so we can go, yeah, we need to repeat that, because why are we spending so much time talking about the stuff we've done wrong, and we're not spending any time reflecting on, hang on, why were we so successful that time? What did we do differently? So it's that recognition of both. So what we're saying is that 2, 1, that's not happening. 2 comes in as a positive impact in either behaviours, choice, execution. Remember, execution is often behaviour because they're not committed, so it's normally down to the choice. And at that point, they can also, so 1 can reach out to 2, 1 can reach out to peers to say, guys, I don't understand, help me here, live, or if they need a quick stop, they can. But they can all reach out there, and they are what I call Sherlock Holmes. So once they can't work it out themselves, then they can reach out to the coach. But it's unacceptable for them to reach out to the coach before they've done their Sherlock Holmes bit. So they can't just go, no, we can't work it out, coach. That's unacceptable. It's their last choice, but they can reach out to the coach. Coach is now saying, I'm seeing it, I'm not seeing it, I'm not seeing it. Right, judgment call now, I need to step in because they're not doing what they agreed, and I've given them time at 2 to recognise it and do something about it.
I can imagine that one of the things that you work on with coaches the most is elongating the time between the coach awareness of a particular issue, the problem becoming apparent that it needs to be solved, the players developing an awareness of that, but it's obviously much slower than the coaches because A, they're in the middle of the activity, and B, they don't necessarily have the technical framework or the tactical framework that the coach has got in the background so they can see it immediately. And so I imagine your biggest challenge is getting coaches to give the players the space to allow them to develop that self-awareness or peer support before intervention.
Yeah, and it's I certainly say I'm more effective at allowing coaches that I'm starting to support is to be aware of the what ifs before they happen. That's one of the areas that you'll often see where there will be a player that's worked it out, but they're not vocal. They're internally, they know this is the right thing to do right now, but I'm not going to say anything. So the coach is now looking and he's, hang on, I'm letting it go. I'm not seeing change. And now we've got to ask the coach, are you scanning effectively? Because if they're attempting change, let it keep going because they're thinking. So that's great. And they're attempting new things. As long as they're committing and following the behaviors, that's great. The behaviors drop. Hang on, we've got to go to 3 if they're not recognizing it. But it's also sometimes when we have to do that quick stop, especially early on, and I call them 10-second resets, where we stop and we say, okay, guys, who recognized what was happening here? Bam, bam, bang. Okay, so what are your choices? Yeah, I agree. So why didn't you do something about it? Because you're telling me now you recognize it, but you did nothing about it. So what prevented you? Now, often you get no voice come in. So the coach can say, I'm giving you permission to make that choice. And guess what? Everyone, the most junior players, the senior, has that. What I don't want you to do is come in, tell me the answer when I question you, and you haven't applied it in the moment, because that's telling me you understand it. So one of the big steps is to get the coach to understand, okay, I need to know how to scan. I need to let them go. And if it's adapting, great. Even if there's not success in what the coach previously thought was success. So for me is if they're making a different choice and they're committed, and hey, that's success because you can see them thinking. And eventually I've always seen them getting somewhere, and often it's not what the coach is even expecting, but it's a solution. So then it's supporting the coach, say, look, even if it's not your idea and it's working, they've now worked it out, they're owning it, let's go with that one. But also then getting the coach to understand some of the players will get it, they're just not used to vocalizing. So don't let them off the hook. Give them the permissions and use those resets as a tool to say, look, guys, we're not moving, we're ready when we're ready. We're not moving forward with this until you commit to what you agreed. And that is using the rule of 3 and keeping it alive. So it doesn't take long, so long as we pre-arm the coaches, say, this will probably happen. Be aware of it. here's some tools to help you deal with this when it does. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. But even then, I imagine, I know this has been a major challenge of mine for a long time, which is, as a coach, I'm kind of programmed to help. So very often when you see something that's kind of sort of breaking down, you can see the players maybe getting frustrated and maybe struggling to work it out. The natural inclination is to step in, probably at the moment when the players are just about to begin to sort of become aware of the challenge. Because, of course, they haven't got our depth of knowledge and experience. So they're not necessarily going to see the problem that needs to be solved, or they're not even going to see the solution. Sometimes it takes a while for the solution to even present itself to them. So you just need to give the space for that. That's part of the problem. Is I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on about that coach I was mentoring. All they saw was struggle, and therefore they thought struggle is bad. Struggle needs to be fixed. In reality, the struggle was the place where the learning was taking place. And probably with another 2 minutes, the whole thing starts to move on.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things in there, actually, because one of the areas I've experienced is that some coaches can be so self-learned or training learned in, with this problem, we have 5 solutions, and it is this, and this. And they'll teach. But actually, when a player isn't aware of those, they can often come up with a solution the coach hasn't even got in his toolkit of A, B, C, D, how to play. And all of a sudden now they're just looking and go, well, what can we do here? Well, let's try this. And they're not restricted by, oh, no, coach says we've got to do this play here and this play here, which is killing, teams, because we're not allowing them to think. But we're saying we want them to think, but then we're going, well, actually, you can only do this, and this in this situation. And sometimes when they haven't got that and we just allow them, you're right, that key thing is teaching coaches to understand what scanning actually looks like and what are you scanning for. You're not just stood there looking. Do you know what you're actually scanning for? Do you know what you're listening to? And importantly as well, the last thing within this was that at the beginning of the session, you've got to agree what success is. And that makes it so much easier. So often coaches can't do that or don't do that at the beginning of the session. They might say what the aim is, but they don't agree what success is. So you may have pods in training where you're moving into something, but at the beginning of each one, then whether it's a 10-minute session or a 40-minute session or a 20-minute phase, is we need to let them know what success looks like. So that may not be where we come to you're scoring a goal or, we're getting to this. It may be we're overcoming or we're coming up with strategies to deal with a certain defensive player or transition or whatever it might be. But we're not telling what it is. We want to tell them, well, actually, here's the challenge. Success is for that actually we've worked out, we've problem solved, and it may just be in choice, it may not be in execution, but we've recognized options we can use to deal with these challenges in defense, attack, or transition. And that simply may be successes. So it's critical we do that, because often we have players and athletes that they're still determined successes that they win or lose through the scoreline or it looks nice. So we've got to, as soon as we have those review chats, we've got to remind them, guys, what did we say success was? Okay, remind me what we said, what that looks like. Okay, so review based on that to keep them honest based on what we said the session was about. And I think that's another tool that some coaches don't use often enough, in my opinion.
That's something I see all the time, actually, is the review about stuff that isn't necessarily relevant to the aim. Yeah. Interestingly, what you were talking, there's a couple of things I want to unpick there. The first one, just going right back to the start, is this idea of the coach having the solutions at the ready. And I see this a lot as well, particularly in the kind of questioning or the huddle, the extended discussion in the huddle, which I see a lot. People think it's good practice, but actually it's just going on forever. Anyway, in that dialogue, there's basically what I describe as the coach guessing game going on, where the coach is asking a question and basically waiting for the players to play back to them the answer that the coach is waiting to hear. And then obviously the coach, then, the delight shows up on their face, the body language changes, and then they shower them with praise, either intentionally or just through their body language, that they've got the answer. So what the players become quite cute to that then. They're not really thinking about it in the game. They just go and play the game without any thought process. So there's no learning taking place. They come into the huddle because the coach has stopped it. They haven't had a chance to talk about this. And then it's right, there's the guessing game, right? What is it he wants to hear? And they'll throw out words until one of them happens to stumble across something that's loosely related to one of the 5 solutions the coach has got in mind, and then off the coach goes and starts explaining everything and all that sort of stuff, and then bingo, everybody's happy and the coach is happy and the players go off and go back to their game without having really learned anything. I see that all the time.
Yeah, and it's 2 things there, isn't it? Players are very good at learning answers, so they know in this situation it's commonly width or communication. Yeah. They know that they don't have to know what's going on. They go, well, coach is asking this question. When he asks this question, this is the answer, so I'll throw it out. And also, coaches understanding the reason for asking a question. So we want to get. My big thing is to get coaches to understand. We want to get to a point where we don't have to ask any questions. So think of it like that. And they look at me like I'm crazy and say, think about it. We want players that can problem solve live and have worked it out. So when they come in, they know we're going to ask for a review of it. So why do we even ask them to review or ask them any specific questions? They know what's coming. We want to listen and we want to connect with, I've just seen and listened to this. Are you recognizing what I've just recognized now? And let's get some, if it's grey, I can ask a question for detail, but we want to get to a point where we don't even ask the questions. They've recognized what they did. They recognize the changes they made. They recognize what success, what wasn't, and where they need to grow within this. And we're going, okay, great. So if it's an end phase, brilliant. And if we're still going, okay, so they've just told me what they're now going to do. Great. Show me. Why do I need to ask any questions or say anything? So it's getting coaches to think. And it's back to athlete-centered, is not standing on the sideline and then asking questions, is getting to a point where we don't have to ask any.
You're right. However, in the learning phase, obviously, we do have to ask questions. The thing for me, though, that I think is important, and you just alluded to it, which is critical, is the question really needs to be framed around understanding what the players are aware of. Because actually, if you don't understand what they're aware of, you can't work out whether they are paying attention to the sorts of things that are likely to provide them with an understanding of the potential solutions available. So first and foremost, I think that's where the questioning has to be around that. But one of the things I've done a lot of late is if I ask a question, I don't want them to tell me the answer. I want them to show me the answer. So do it in your action. So I'm asking a question which might draw their awareness towards a particular action. Like, what are the potential action possibilities that you've got in this game? And then don't tell me. Go and do it, and then report back what you noticed when you were playing. That's a really different concept.
Oh yeah. A big thing for me is that show me the answer, don't tell me the answer. And it's as you say, questions are a backup. And what I mean by that is we need to teach players how to self-review, so live. So the same as it's been used successfully many years with extreme adventurous trainers, climbers, mountaineers, is knowing how to internally in your mind go, right, make a choice, commit, what happened, what was the difference, what would have changed if anything, bam, 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 bang. And it's a way of thinking. It means you have closure, you're in the present, you're committing, you're just flowing. So when they come in, it's just they know you're asking them for a review. They know the review is going to be, if it's a generalized one, on what we said success was in a session. So then coach all has to do there is, I'm listening to that. I saw something over there. Now I've listened. And they can say, okay, Billy, Steve, talk to me about what happened over there. And all of a sudden now we're seeing, are they recognizing the adjustment? And back to the other point is we need to recognize coaches need to challenge players, athletes to share what went excellent as well. And not always go for, well, actually, this didn't work, bang, bang, bang. Always talking about the unacceptable. So coaches aren't great at that either. They're scanning for everything that's going wrong. When they ask a player a question, it's 99% because they've done something wrong. So the player's now going, coach has asked me a question, must have done something wrong. It's probably this. As opposed to get to an environment where coach is asking for art review, shouting your name out, you're running back. I may not be I've done something wrong. It may be I've done something exceptional because now I know coach is asking me because it's interesting in my awareness of what happened, and it could be either. So now we're getting players, and initially they'll be really slow with this, but it won't take long for they'll just throw the one hard conclusion back. Ninja on that, ninja on the wing, coach, and he just thumbs up. Great, don't have to stop the session for that. But if he sees a trend that's not happening or they've had a level of exceptional success they've never had before, he can pull them, okay, review that. And straight away the discussion. Then we're minimizing the question because the only time we need a question is if they have grey areas somewhere. We go, can you give me a detail on this? Okay, so what if this happened? Or can you talk to me about what happened over there? I'm interested in that. And as you say, then we recognise the conclusions, but they're conclusion on what they did, not concluding on what they should have done. They've shown you the answer already, but then if it's that, okay, now we're telling your coach we're going to do this, great, show me, off you go. So we're really minimising that time. And if we can get players to learn how to self-review, the amount of questions we need to give them is a lot less. And we're getting them to think in the way we want them to live. We're not just getting them as they run in to go, oh, yeah, let me think about what just happened over there. They'll know what's already happened. And you know you're coming in. The coach is going to be all ears because he's really interested in your opinion.
And the great thing then is the questions become about clarification or additional detail or being more precise about something. You know, it's like, oh, so you've noticed that, right? That's really interesting. Tell me more. You know, there's nothing greater, I think, for a learner to have somebody engage with them in that way. Oh, you've noticed, so that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Well, I noticed this, that, and the other. Oh, okay. What is it about that specifically that you think we need to drill into a little bit more? Oh, yeah. And then they, you know, I just think that's really, really powerful for the learner. They're really engaged in that process. And then what it then does, I think, it becomes quite a powerful message to the others that volunteering information should never be seen as something that is negative or difficult, or you're going to be challenged, or you might get it wrong, even if they're not openly saying it's wrong. It's just an opportunity for further dialogue, which I think is, you know, often missed.
Yeah, and then it's making sure we have that balance, because we want them to be playing, we want them to be moving. So it's targets on the area where it says, right, this is something I want to talk about afterwards. It may be in the cool down, speaking to a couple of the players. Is it relevant or no? Okay, I'm not going to ask it, but I'm going to take note on it. And then recognizing if we have certain players that always answer, we either go down the right, I'll nominate, or we just pull those players to the side and go, right, I love, you know, I'm cool that you have this, but I want to develop the other players. So I'm asking you to be silent on this next phase. So when they come in, we're going to have other people talking. It's just helping everybody grow. But that listening, that ability to listen is a skill many coaches definitely need to focus on as one of their development areas. In just my observations over the years that we've been really sitting down with coaches, and it's amazing how often when they're watching a video back, they say, well, I didn't actually hear that question from that player. I didn't hear what they said. And you've got the quiet guy in the background that's 2 or 3 back because the coach hasn't got them all to stand side by side so they can all see in front. And he's saying the right thing, but he's not saying it with a confident, strong voice, but it's actually the right answer. So it's having the ability to really scan and listen and go, well, Steve, what did you just say there? I love that. You want to share that with the group? Yeah. And that's where the questions become effective. But it's almost, we always want to get to that point where we say, my aim is so I don't have to ask questions, because you'll give me all the answers I need, and then you're going and showing me, fantastic. And then all you have is the what ifs. So, okay, bam, great. Well, what if they do this? What are you going to do then? Or what if they did this? We're going to do, okay, can you show me that? Great, show me, bang. So now we're exploring those other options based on the answer they've given you, which again is show me, off we go. And they're doing it again, but now they're filling their toolkit up with showing strategies to problems, but you're not telling them, they're coming out with them themselves. So for me, that's when we're really getting some growth from the players.
The other way I've managed that in the past as well is, in order to make sure that everybody has a voice, is because often within the review, like you say, you either get dominant characters or you just get everybody throwing different things out, is to either pose that question or kind of draw attention based on the previous review, whatever it might be, draw attention to a particular area. All right, okay, you've all just, we've identified this area, fine. So then next phase of play or whatever, or whatever we're doing. So right, so you, Jimmy, you're going to lead the review the next time we come in, and then they know that they do have to be on point at that moment, and then everybody gets to go at almost like being the captain and leading the review and giving their opinion as a way to make sure that each one of them has a voice.
Yes, and that actually reminds me of another element sometimes we miss, is if they have now come up with a strategy of what they're going to go away and show you, and they've agreed, okay, show me. What we often don't do is we're not scanning for that to say, okay, are you now doing what you said you were going to do? And if there's an adaptation, am I seeing the adaptation? So then when they come in again, are we now getting them to, okay, so remind me what you said. How did that go? Often we're just reviewing again, and we're not actually holding them accountable to what they said they were going to commit to.
Yeah.
So, and the answer may be, well, we couldn't do that because of this. That's what we did it. Well, great. That's what I saw too. Brilliant. Or it may be, oh no, we didn't. And I see that so often when we have these chats, and often it's a bit too coach dominant anyway. And the players are all nodding. They go away. They don't do what the coach has asked. But the next review, it's not even discussed. They're just talking about something else again. So then we go, well, what's the point of this discussion right now? Because you're having no impact. So it's, this is where we're back to that point. Have we developed them to self-review? Do we understand the point of, so one of the other tools I use, especially with groups, is we say, right, 60 seconds maximum. So that's how long before they can go out again. So they come in, we've already agreed with them, these are the groups you're going to have. So when I blow the whistle, we sprint in, you go straight into your groups. You have 30 seconds or 20 seconds or 10, whatever you decide. So we start off with 30. In their groups, they're now concluding. Then they come into you, then you nominate someone from each group. Now you can do the same as you said there, Stuart. So, well, you're going to be doing it next. I also have people on the sideline. So for me, no one is disengaged. If anyone's injured or anyone support, I give them a role, and I always let them know I could be pulling you in to manage this review in this phase, but I want, whether it's looking at behaviours or choices, tactics based on success, what you're seeing the whole time. So they're engaged and they're involved in the review. So it's making sure everyone knows, well, actually, I could be the one that asked, but it's not trying to catch me out, because I want to understand anyway, because that's going to give me confidence. Not thinking like we're at school, well, I hope he doesn't ask me. Is go, no, I'm cool. He can ask me because I already know the answer.
That's one of the things I think is a really powerful one as well. Is like, if you've got odd numbers and you've got players off the field, they're not just standing there doing nothing. You're either doing a direct review with them. Sometimes I have a scenario where you've got 3 teams and 1 team's off. Well, that's the opportunity to do review with that team before they then go back into the field to play another field. But what often they do is they just stand around watching the game while a coach is watching what's happening on the field of play. To be honest, what can be happening on the field of play is absolutely fine. Don't even always necessarily need to pay attention to that, because what often I'm doing is when the players come off the field, I'm saying, what was it you said you were going to do in the last round? Did you do it? Right. You did do it, or you didn't, what was it you did do it, or did you not do it? And, and then we start talking about why did it not, and this, that, and the other. And funnily enough, I did it on a coach education course recently with novice coaches, and we were talking about that, and they were sort of playing the game, and I said they'd came up with their strategy they were going to adapt, came back and like this, that, and the other, and they said, oh yeah, we're not sure that's going to work. And I said, but did you commit to that? Did you commit to it, and did you do it 100%? No, we didn't do it 100%. Well, we can't tell whether it's worked or not unless we've done it 100%, can we? Oh no, yeah, you're right. Go back in. So it's quite interesting. Even with novice coaches, they're taking on board these ideas.
Yeah. And that's critical of going back to that point, is we have to drive behaviours first. So behaviours are unacceptable based on what we've agreed in the present time, is we don't review. We can never review if it's not committed, so we just send them out again. There is no discussion, because they need to understand this is critical. So let's not waste time discussing something that gives us no information that is of value. Let's go. Show me, commit. Let's go. It's simple.
So, interestingly, just want to take you back to something you said earlier on as well, just winding back, which is you talked earlier on about framing what success looks like.
Yes.
I genuinely think this is one of the most difficult things. There's a few reasons for this that I'm going to go into, but one of the things that somebody who was on my podcast a few weeks ago, Amy Price, she was on talking about video games and how video games can be used for learning, and some of the principles of video games that can be applied into coaching and coaching design and session design. It's a really interesting conversation. One of the things she talked about was establishing the mission. And I think that might go some way to what you were talking about in terms of what success looks like. It's saying the mission is to do this, or the mission is to work towards this goal. And that's a way of framing what success looks like. Or have I got that completely wrong?
Well, it could be, but also it could miss the checkpoints along the way. So if you think about a mission, that's normally the desired outcome. You win in the battle, but actually you're not discussing the firefights. So where success can come in, I'll give you a great example of success. Success could be that this session we are minimal acceptable in communication every moment of the session. Success is this right now. Now we're going to use some tactics and some plays that you already know, and I'm going to throw some challenges and situations in. I may adjust the pressure loading for you, but that is success for us today.
What, minimal communication, for example?
No. So they've already shown us what effective communication is. So we don't discuss it, although we can have a chat. So can you show me now for 20 seconds? Okay. So what is now we all agree. We know what it looks like. Okay. So what would be unacceptable? So remember now, communication goes beyond traditional communication because we've got the rule of three, right? So we're saying behaviors first. We're saying, okay, our communication it's only effective if it has the desired success. So I don't care if it's clear, loud, and all the blah, blah, blah. If it doesn't have the desired success, it is ineffective. So we got to make sure, understand each other. So we know with some people, we need a whisper in the ear and a tap, hand touch back. We need to be more direct. But there needs to be, that's where the rule of two comes in, is if someone's given us feedback, they know the intention is good because they want to help us get better, we must accept. And there must be a physical hand up, hand touch, acceptance. So we have that as well as the volume, but understanding, hang on, what do we need to say in transition and defense? Because we don't need white noise here. What is it? What's it sound like? Okay, now we know. Okay, so success for us is to remain minimum acceptable in communication for the whole of the session.
Okay. So acceptable as the minimum, yeah?
As the minimum, yes.
Never dropping below acceptable.
Correct.
Right, got it.
Now, there's additional tools we can use, like the reset tool is very powerful. Well, initially, because no team's going to make that. No team I've ever seen has been able to do that yet because they're so used to dipping in and out of comms. Most of the time, it's unacceptable. Then the coach talks about it, they all agree, and then they go out for 10 seconds. It's great, then it dips again. So one of the tools we can use is, okay, you tell me how long you can stay minimal acceptable in communication. And they might say 3 minutes. Okay, clock goes for 3 minutes. At any time you're unacceptable, initially I'm going to give you 5 seconds to recognize it, say something at rule of two, and for you to accept it, bring it back up. And if it's 5 seconds and you deal with it within that time, the clock continues to run. However, if you don't recalibrate it back to acceptable within that 5 seconds, I'm shouting reset. I can either give them 10 seconds to talk amongst themselves and go again, or they get no seconds. The stopwatch goes back to 0 and we go again. Our aim is to get to 3 minutes. So, the intensity goes through the roof. And you can do this with many things. I'm just using communication as an example based on behaviors. And it's a game changer because now there's intent. They're holding each other accountable because they don't want to go back to 0. Now, there may be times when after 4 or 5, they're not at 3. You need to bring them, okay, so what's preventing us from being successful right now, guys? What do we need to change? And they might say, Coach, we're not ready for 3 minutes. You've now got us to recognize how poor we are at comms. Can we recalibrate in 90 seconds? And in that moment, you go, okay, let's go. But in 2-3 weeks, we need to get back to the 3 minutes. We're cool with that. We're going to stretch this because our aim is to get to the whole game. So if it's 90 seconds right now, we've never been doing it effectively for 90 seconds. Let's go for 90 seconds and let's stretch it. So now they're owning it, but they understand the value. And also we've recalibrated their baseline of reality of actually how poor they are at it.
So hang on a second. This is I'm going to ask you for another example in a minute, but I just want to drill into this for a second because, oh God, I've used that word twice in this podcast already. I'm going to get in real trouble. They will. I'll have to put explicit on the podcast when it goes out. Yeah. So in this idea, right, you are doing a whole session. Yes, there's stuff on tactical, whatever, but the whole session, the learning outcome is how well you communicate.
Success,
doubt I have ever seen a coach do a session focused on something like communication ever in all my time doing coach development or ever. It's
correct, and that's why teams are so poor at it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
That's why teams are so, yeah. I mean, you'll see it when you see the sessions that I'm supporting, because for me, I'll give you a great example. In basketball, with most teams, you say, right, if you can only pick some critical areas that you would have the maximum impact on you as a team, what would they be? And I guarantee you most would come out with 3. Transition, rebounds, and communication. And they're the 3. I said, okay, so what you're saying is if these are effective, And we need to agree what that looks like, by the way. So I need to have that discussion. You're telling me that will have a huge impact in your team. And they all say, yeah, phenomenal. I mean, it's a game changer for us. And then I ask them, okay, so communication, how often have you ever put that as your priority focus in a session? If you're saying this is now critical, and the answer I have had back every single time is we never have. So for me, we're not stepping back and looking at what are the daddies, I like using that word, but what are those critical elements that will give us our greatest return on investment, the things we use every single time, every single game that we know we're unacceptable at. Because that's where our focus needs to be. The tactical and tech, that's secondary to these fundamentals. And you can see that in rugby, in football, in netball, in basketball, in lacrosse, in hockey, across the stage, it is the same.
Because in a team game, the cohesive aspect of a team executing, you go back to what you said earlier on around executing with intent under pressure.
Yeah.
The key aspect of them being able to execute is there's a cohesive element to that, and that can only be done with effective communication. So it's the glue that allows the tactical stuff to be actually delivered. Without that glue, it never takes place in the first place.
Yeah, and that's where I always, when I'm first working with coaches initially, I say, let's work on two elements. And they're kind of focus tools to allow the coach to bring their own philosophy of coaching into the athlete's entities, the rule of three and communication. So communication is actually in the rule of three because you have to use effective communication at 2. One is excellence is at 1. So at 1, we're asking people to be excellent in the moment, behaviors, and make a choice and commit to it 100%. So I'm just saying to coaches, can you show me that? And let's work on improving that. And when that happens, their eye is taken off overloading technical and tactical. And all of a sudden they go, well, I have to cut at least half my content out. And I say, why? It's because, well, now I'm recognizing if we need to improve in these areas, that's what I need to do to be successful in this session. And we go, great, I'm loving that word. So now you're recognizing what you need to do to be successful in this session. Fantastic.
So what I said I was going to ask for another example. I'm conscious that obviously within this dynamic, we talked a lot about the kind of dynamic team game context. But obviously in a more individual type game, I mean, you said you've been working with tennis, these sorts of scenarios. What would be, you talked about, the daddy or, kind of what gives us the biggest return on investment. I'm assuming it might not be communication in that context. It might be something else. But give me an example of something else that might be used in this way.
So if we go a bit deeper,
how you would do it. Yeah.
So if we can look at two options, even in tennis, and actually let's use tennis and golf because they can fit with both. Is we may be one when we're saying, I'm going to ask you to be in the present moment in this whole session. Be in the present. Agree what that looks like. Okay, that's all we need to do. So long as you agree what it looks like and there's a honesty and challenge, or it may be, all I want you to do is make a choice and commit to it and be in the present. So what we're saying to them is, make a choice, commit, and then, right, what's next? Make a choice and commit. Make a choice and commit. That's all I'm asking you to do. Don't care where the ball's going. I don't care about the scoreline. In fact, there is no scoreline now because that's what success is for us. And we just manipulate the environment to allow them to focus and just be relentless within that. And you can see how context you can do that with golf as well. I mean, how big is negative self-talk in golf, or just making a choice and committing to it and not having two in your head?
So you would manipulate the environment by putting different layers of pressure, like you say, or different challenges or whatever it might be.
And often reducing
that, the agreement or the task, if you like, to use one of Kendall McQuaid's phrases, the task. He would say, again, so the task is make a choice and commit. The outcome isn't what we're interested in at this point. The point was, did you make a choice? Did you commit to it?
Yeah. And then review the choice and the commitment because that's all we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then when they start talking about other stuff, remind me what we said success was. Okay. And what we've got to do as well early on is we've got to make sure that before we introduce anything new, we've got to challenge them is what's the value of this? So if we don't tell them the value, we challenge them to the value and they need to tell us. And we may need to do the what if because they may thinking, well, that sounds like some learnt answer. Okay. So what about this situation? What about how can it have an impact here? And if we're getting the answers we want, we believe, okay, now we can start. But if we're not getting the value, we're not going to start. No point.
Now, sorry, I was just scribbling as you were writing there, as you were talking there. So, so it can be any of these things that are. I mean, you've chosen at the moment sort of behavioural things because often I think you tend to find that they're overlooked by coaches and yet they're massively powerful. So very often these are the things that are going to give the biggest return on investment, which are the things that, because coaches generally are looking for technical and tactical solutions to answers. Something occurred to me earlier. I'm going to go on to another one in a minute about another behavioural one, but I'm just going to go on to another one, which is just going back to something you were talking about earlier on. I think going back to that thing I was talking about, how people wouldn't focus on this idea of how we communicate, and that wouldn't be the desired outcome. This is what success looks like, because that's rarely done in that way. As a result, I think this is one of the reasons why coaches often then revert to compliance as a framework to create some sort of team cohesion. It's saying, right, this is the plan, this is the game plan, and if we rigidly adhere to this game plan, we will be successful. And usually then if that doesn't transpire, because things happen in the chaos of the game and the plan kind of sometimes has to go out the window and we have to adapt and adjust, and the players can't adapt and adjust because they've never been given anything to enable them to adapt and adjust effectively live in the moment with the pressure of competition and everything else going on. And then they, the phrase is used, they reverted to type, or they crumbled under the pressure. Well, the reality is that they didn't do any of those things. They just weren't given the tools to be able to navigate the complexity and chaos of the competitive environment. And and it's frustrating to me that these are the things I think that are really, like you say, I agree with you entirely. These are the things, the most powerful learning opportunities, and yet they're the things that no one spends any time doing.
Yeah, and there's two elements to that. Is the first one is that we need to agree, I've used the word non-negotiables in the past, where they are the 1, 2, possibly 3, but normally only 1 or 2 things that we agree with every team that when we do these, it's going to give us our greatest success. And one of them may be communication. One of them may be in being ready, i.e. wherever you are, if you're packing your bag, you're getting up in the morning. Am I ready? Be ready. Am I in position? Am I ready? Be ready. Whatever it may be, any game, doesn't matter. That may be. So what we've got to do is let's say, for instance, communication was one, because it's a big one for many people. If we put that as a non-negotiable, we definitely need to put it forefront of a training session. No question about that. But here's the key thing. Even when we get success in that session, in another session where we're not focused on that and it becomes unacceptable, we must be ready to drop the content of the session or change it to something else, because our focus must be back on the non-negotiable, because what we're saying is non-negotiables come number one ahead of anything else. And when they're unacceptable, our focus must be to get them back acceptable. So we want to develop an environment where, using the rule of 3, that athletes can recognize that live. We don't have to stop play. They can communicate and they can bring them back up, whatever they are. But as a coach, we need to understand that's how important they are, because we've agreed they are. That's what we must be prepared to do in every single session. So in order to do that, we need to be scanning for it and not get caught up in the tactics that I wrote down in my training plan. Even if we're really good and we're now manipulating environments and there isn't a schedule, we're just doing transition, defense and attack, and we're problem solving, we're manipulating the environment, we still need to be scanning for our non-negotiables that we've agreed with every single player. And are they alive? Because as soon as they're unacceptable, they'll have a huge impact in everything we're doing. So we need to bring them to number one again.
That's a really, really important point. And I think that's something that people will very, very quickly and very easily lose sight of, because they'll kind of delude themselves and fool themselves. We've got to cover this content. I know those non-negotiables are important, but I've just got to get through this content. We can come back to no. They're non-negotiables for a reason. If we're not doing them, we can't do the other stuff. We must get that back to its acceptable level before we come back to that. Otherwise, you won't be working on the stuff in the right way. It's that delusional thing.
Yeah. And there'll be people listening to this podcast that I've been mentoring, and they'll be chuckling now, because I'm kind of like a shadow when it's live support. And I deliberately don't interject unless they say, Mark, can you run this, lead this session? And I'll go, yeah, okay, if you want to see this tool, no problem. So if I'm not doing that, I'm literally like a little shadow in the background. No one really notices me. But now and again, I'm scanning for everything. I'm scanning for non-negotiables first, then what they said success was. So as soon as I see a non-negotiable and acceptable, I'm giving it, and I'm using a rule of 3, being the coach at 2. So I'm now at 3. And I just wander up, whisper in the ear, okay, how are we doing on the nons? And you can, okay, so what's your strategy? What are you going to do? And I just step back, show me. So they know, my God, this guy's relentless. He's not letting me off the hook at all. But it's just getting them, God, yeah. And so that's where we have the strategy, where if we have someone on the sideline, often, especially if they haven't got an assistant coach, is we give that person the role of, say, right, your role is to watch the non-negotiables or the behaviors, whatever they may be. And that non-negotiables are generally behaviors, unless it could be something like, transition, which would be big for teams, scanning for that. And so then they feed back to coach, because that's your only job. So coach, how are we doing? Yeah, coach, that's dropped a bit. So then coach can start looking at, the tactics, whatever, of the game, and not miss it, which is very easy to do, especially if you're new to this, because I develop an order of scan behaviors first, then content, whatever that may be. So it's always scan, and you're scanning all the time. Yes, no, okay. Now I'm looking at rule of 3, 1 and 2, no, I'm leaving, I'm stepping in, reset 3, comms guys, bang, off we go again. So you need to be in the present to do that, and it's tough, it's effective. So having someone on the sideline scanning that for you and supporting you as coach, one is getting someone on the sideline engaged, but also is really supportive to keep the coach honest.
That's I love that, by the way, the shadow.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Yes.
I've experienced that myself.
Yes.
Ninja-like. Didn't notice you were there, and all of a sudden you pop up with that.
Yeah. Oh, he's still
question.
here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, killer question. Oh, God, that's thrown me.
Yeah.
What's interesting, something you just said there, you said right quite back early on in the podcast, you talked about behavior first, then performance, then outcome, or performance, then results. Yeah. I'm pretty certain most people, when they're scanning the other way around.
They are. Yeah. Well, I would argue sometimes they don't even scan for behavior, although when you ask them at the end of the session, they often say players were disengaged or communication was bad or they had no intent, the session was dead, but they're not scanning for it. It's like a reflective thought. They're not doing anything about it in the moment, or they'll let play run for 5-10 minutes. They'll stop and go, guys, communication, yeah, and it will go up for 5-10 seconds. It will drop down again. Because there's no focus on it, it will never change. I mean, that's the reality of it. Unless you place it real, it's important, because that's where our focus is. It will always be how it is, and if it's unacceptable, then accept that actually it's not unacceptable, it's acceptable, because if you're allowing it to happen every single session, what you're saying is it is acceptable.
Yeah, whether you're explicitly saying it or not. Yeah.
You're allowing the puppy to poo on a carpet, as I say.
Yeah, which you just can't have.
No.
Right. So there's just absolutely masses in there. One other question I had earlier on, and you kind of answered it, I think, when you talked about scanning for the exceptionals. Yeah. But in the rule of 3, do you ever frame that with the players where the self-awareness and the peer support is framed around a positive rather than a corrective?
They have to do both. So basically what we're saying to them is, I want to see a hand up at 1 when you're unacceptable and when you're exceptional. And I need to see 2, peer support in unacceptable and exceptional. So if I see a player doing something exceptional, I want to be hearing you going to that player, nailed it, Danny. And that player, Danny, to accept it, because some people don't like accepting exceptional. So they have to accept that as much as any other type feedback. So what I'm saying, and this is where it kind of connects to the coaches when they go, Mark, well, I need the environment to be, electric. So that's why I'm running up and down shouting and everything. And I'm saying, where should that be coming from? The players, yeah, because unfortunately, I'm not saying all coaches, because this is definitely not all coaches, but some coaches have earned a living on developing effective training. They call it effective, but the training is only effective for training. It's got nothing to do with the match or the game. So it's just a false environment that, it's almost you're looking at and go, this is a really good game that you're developed here, because it's nothing like the game you're going to play on Saturday. they're painting by numbers, you're shouting, they're nodding, they're going up and down within their communication, they're going up and down in their transition, whatever it may be, of the quality. And it's kind of, you're just looking there thinking, what is the aim of training? To prepare them for matches. Okay. So if we're preparing them for matches, who has to make the decisions? Who has to recognize when things are going well? Who needs to keep everyone alive and in the game and in the present? Players do. Okay. So show me where that's happening right now, because I can't see it. And it's that type of, going back to the beginning point we said, Stuart, we need to know what athlete-centered looks like, and we need to know what success looks like. So we need to know, well, if our aim is to make ourselves redundant, where players can make these decisions, execute with intent, review both the decision and the execution live under any type of pressure, then that's what training should be doing to prepare them for that. And for me, when we that Stephen Covey statement, begin with the end in mind, is I really find that a simple statement, because that's what training should be. What is success in the long run? That's where your mission would come in. What is the mission? Well, that's where active, reactive, proactive, players working out for themselves, keeping each other engaged, keeping each other up, recognizing when they're doing something well, exceptional, and continuing to do it because it's working, recognizing when it's unacceptable, support each other to change in choice. Execution is relentless and patient. Non-negotiables are there all the time. That's your mission, to be doing that in every single game. But success is in those moments. What would success for be us now? Kind of the facilitators to achieve the mission. And I see that's where those contextually would synergize.
Some people might go away from this thinking that it's always got to be somehow representative of a match type environment, because they, have probably got the impression that we talk about pressure and we've talked about, all those sorts of things, which I would say is by and large, kind of accurate in the sense that we are looking for things that transfer, to the game. You make a really good point that people have made, do great training sessions that don't transfer. Yeah. I think the other point, like you say, is often the sessions aren't necessarily all that representative of the context that the players are going to be performing under, and therefore it's, again, not necessarily that supportive. However, there are moments, aren't there, where you kind of need to dial it all down. You need to take away some of the chaos and the noise, because actually there's some things that we need to attend to that are going to give us the ability to perform under pressure once we've then started to layer them back. Now, I would still be always trying to do that in as contextualized a way as possible. However, again, though, the point here is that under those circumstances where we have taken some of the noise away because we wanted to attend to a particular thing, we're still going to frame what success looks like, and we're still going to be relentless around the behaviors that are going to drive us towards that success. So people shouldn't go under the impression that, you've always just got to have match type chaos. It doesn't have to be like that. We're talking about the behavioural framework that goes alongside it.
Yeah, and that's that point of the behaviours should be every time. And this is coach and athlete behaviours. So, let's make sure coaches understand what their successful behaviour is as well. So for me, I see coaches generally of having 3 caps. So, and I name them in a learning session, so a learning focused session, and there may be pods in a session. This is now, we're learning, guys. So this is a pace, they set the pace, the players go, they can chat, they can discuss, they can walk through it, they can jog through it, they can watch someone else doing it, they can have a discussion, they can try new things. Let me know when you need me. And then if it's something new, okay, challenge to the value. Okay, so guys, here's some ways to do it. These are successful ways. Let's explore what's going to work for our uniqueness of this team. That's learning. The behaviors are still there. They never go away. Then you have performance sessions. So performance sessions now says, right, now I'm going to attempt to catch you out. So I'm putting a different cap on now. I'm nasty now. And I'm going to put situations on, and I'm going to stretch. So I'm going to see where your competency is. And when you get consistent there, I'm going to stretch you a little bit more. And I'm going to put surprises and problems. I'm always going to check long-term recall in every session after the warm-up from stuff you worked on before, because I want to see it wasn't short-term recall, it was in long-term recall. So that's covert. I'm throwing these situations in to see how you remember. And then our third cap is match day, game day, is I'm now supportive. So I am at my nastiest on the performance sessions. The learning session, I'm very supportive and helping them grow and understand. And in match day, I'm that support to just help them perform to their max. But I still want to be hot reviewing them, getting them to make decisions based on what we agreed. But I know for each player, I've worked out what's the right thing to say in that moment when they may be losing it a little bit or things aren't going their way. But I'm still at 3. So my aim is always to allow other players to support each other players first. But my state is a supportive state. Performance session, I'm not supportive. I'm attempting to catch them out. And learning is I'm supportive in helping them grow and understand.
Brilliant. That's a really good summary. I love the idea of the hats. I think that works really well. Yeah. The learning, performance, and the game day hats, and the different characteristics of a player. Because I'm not sure people always understand that, and sometimes think that you've got to be in that performance state all the time. Like you said, you don't. But I actually think if you take the 4th hat, which might be the leisure hat, I think often people take off all 3 of those hats. There's no learning, there's no performance, there's no game day. We're just in the let's all just have a nice time hat. And that's not a hat you ever want to put on, really, is it? Well, you might do. No. That's an active choice.
It's a choice. It's back down to a choice, yeah. And some people make good livings on taking on leisure clients. But I find a lot of players they say they're leisure because they're disengaged and they're bored. And you develop this type of culture and environment, and some of those become your high performance players because all of a sudden they go, wow, this is enjoyable now. And for me, it's the word between, I know a lot of people use the word fun, and for me, that can be misinterpreted. I prefer to use the word enjoyment. So enjoyment can be for everybody.
Yeah.
Fun can sometimes not be effective. It's just running around. We can get disengaged, kids and adults at all levels. We have disengaged athletes at all levels as well, from kids all the way to high-level professional teams, which I've seen at the highest level in this country and abroad, where players are totally disengaged. They're not thinking for themselves. They don't really understand how to adapt live. And they're getting away with it just because they're the best at the moment in that position. But the team is never going to maximize their potential. And for me, 99.9% of the time, I blame the coaches that they're not developing the type culture and environment that will maximize the engagement and the learning of the players. I mean, I see that as a coach's responsibility. And back to our early discussion, I know we've picked up on it through our Over Coffee podcast. That was the first one we did, but the last one that you released is governing bodies need to really focus on, and bosses. I mean, soccer is probably a big one in this country where, we're in the relegation battle now. Some already have. There's a lot of money involved now. Is the hire and firers need to understand, if we drive the right culture and environment, one, we need to know what that looks like, but we need to support the coaches that are high experienced in technical and tactical and understand this may be new to them, and don't think that they're finished product because they've been coaching for 20 years, because times are changing and every coach needs the support. And as you know, my biggest belief is that the greatest athlete development is coach development. And that never ends at any level, particularly with the tidal change within the athlete-centered approach now, which will be new for many elite-level, national, international, premiership coaches. And they do need the support and the transition through that change.
Totally agree. Interestingly enough, though, I mean, it's one of the reasons I like Amanda Vissek's work on fun integration theory, where she actually went round and actually started to unpick what fun was for kids. Yes. And ironically, when kids talk about fun, they're actually talking about, I think, what we've talked about there. They like working hard. They like being part of a team. Yeah. They like committing to something and feeling a sense of achievement. It isn't just about frivolity and and laughs and jokes. Actually, they actually do feel like they want to develop something. So when you see fun in those lens, I think it actually fits perfectly with what we've talked about here.
Yeah, and it's back to when we use a word is establishing meaning. And again, we have to do that in sport so often with teams and coaches. The words are used or statements in certain plays, and everyone's nodding, but the meaning is so different. So, and if you've heard me in the past, I know people I'm mentoring now is whenever I go into a new organization or situation or we use new words, I always ask the question, can we just clarify meaning on that, just to make sure we're on the same page? And often it is the same, but many times it is totally different. So, it's not a dumb question. It's actually an important question to ask.
Well, Mark's been a whirlwind, as usual. Lots of notes taken. So I've been on this journey for a good, better part of, longer than a decade. It's 15 odd years. And again, we've had a conversation and I'm still here taking notes about little elements of this that you can refine. And this is one of the things that I find so fascinating about working with you and working within the framework is there's always a new way, not even necessarily a new way. There's just a little tweak, a little amendment that we can bring to the table that just makes us a bit better. We can, things that we may have lost sight of, that we just need to dial in a little bit more, make a little bit tighter. And the kids I'm working with on a Friday night at cricket are going to be the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah. Well, baseball's a bit like one-day cricket in my ignorant explanation of the two.
Very much so, yeah.
People will be shaking their head at me right now listening to that, but that's how I put it in perspective.
Yeah, except it's even slower.
Well, yeah. Well, it's back down to one person being picked on, everyone trying to catch them out. It's the same type of philosophy.
Right, brilliant. So, have you got anything going on that people need to be aware of? Is there anywhere people can like see you? Have you got some sort of like world tour happening where they can like an arena tour where people can like buy tickets and stuff like that, or is that just on the agenda for the year?
Well, in the short term, what I'm looking to do is in America, Canada, and UK. One day I'll be there. I'll be explaining a bit of theory, but we'll actually have a live team, so they'll see me doing it. We'll record it. They can also have a go at elements. We come back in, review the video. So instead of just them hearing the theory, so I can have, it may be a basketball team that is live. We've got the players there. They see me running the principles, and there may be rugby players, football players, soccer, golf, doesn't make any difference. So I'm starting to run them. I'm actually running one in Leeds, which is rugby, and I think I shared it on Twitter. But that's only in a couple of weeks, so that may be a bit short. I'm not sure when this podcast goes out, Stuart, but that's on the 19th in Leeds. But I'm looking to run a lot more of them. So if there's anyone interested in hosting one anywhere around the world where they say, look, I can get a team, I can get a room, they just need to advertise it, and I just turn up and I can deliver it for the day. So I found them to be, when it comes to value, the feedback's been very powerful on the learning experience of that.
So they get in touch with you either via Twitter or they go to the website, which is pdscoach.com.
That's the one, yeah. And Twitter's the same, PDS Coach.
Yeah,
Keep
and
it
then
simple.
They can get in touch. So if they've got a ready-made audience or they know there are going to be people in a locality, get in touch with you, and and then in you arrive on your trusty steed, and away we go.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm always interested in the full interventions because that's where my passion is. But the masterclasses seem to be a bonus. We do 2-day ones as well, by the way, where especially if we're going abroad, that actually we can split them up. So we have one, and then the coaches go away, they explore, they film themselves, and they come back 4 to 6 weeks later for another day, and we explore. And again, we can deal with the problems and the challenges, but also we can have another team, and they can explore, they can see me showing them. So it's kind of real live experience of seeing it, bringing it to life beyond just the PowerPoint or a video clip.
Definitely can attest to that. It's immersive, and be prepared to be challenged. So,
yes, that will happen.
Mark, thank you once again for coming on. I know you've been flying all over the place and doing this, that, and the other. So it's been brilliant to be able to sort of reconnect and for you to share some of the experiences that you've had and some of the things that you've been observing. All the best with Cleveland. And I think when you've got a bit further into the journey with them, if they're happy, I think we've talked about this, haven't we? Trying to get a session with one of the guys from Cleveland about sort of the experiences they've had and how it sort of supported them. That'd be a good thing to do in a month or so's time, perhaps.
Oh yeah, that would be fantastic. I mean, we've already got different levels. We've got a working model that's having real impact already within the behaviours of the players. It's a pleasure to watch, and that's again with 3 coaches. Baseball, as you know, is they can have 3-4 games a week, so there's not a lot of training once the season starts between actually all the games. So it's how do we impact players to have learning and performance increases during the game. So that was a nice challenge. But yeah, it would be great for them to share that with you.
Awesome. All right, Mark, appreciate you coming on, and all the best with everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. Absolutely fantastic to have Mark back. Great conversation as always, Mark. Thank you for taking time out of your busy globe-trotting schedule to chat with me and reflect on some of the things that you've been seeing as you've been on your travels, working with different coaches in different sports, in different environments. So much I took away from that conversation. Love that question, by the way. How are we doing on the nons? Love that. Just walking up there and talking about the non-negotiables. The big thing for me about that is that that emphasis on the behaviour that drives the performance, that drives the outcome, and starting with that behaviour, framing that behaviour, and even working on sessions around that behaviour being the outcome that we're looking for in that session, emphasising that, placing more importance on that, because that is the architecture that then drives all of the other performance activities. So it's the behaviours that drive the performance that we're spending time working on, moving on to the tactical and the technical. I think you'll find that that really brings a new level of intensity and a new focus to your sessions. So hope you enjoyed that. Really good stuff, and I hope you can have some real good time with that. A big thanks to Tim Palmer, who recently came on board as a patron. Tim, you're amazing. Big fist bump for you, and I'll look forward to working with you in the conclave over the next few weeks. There are a few spots available in the conclaves if anybody's interested. So jump on board and sign up, and it'd be good to work with you and spend some time having some deep conversations about what we're trying to do. In the meantime, all the best with your coaching this week. I'll see you in a week's time, and remember, ditch those drills.